Middlemarch. This is not how I plan to read Middlemarch. Hi everyone, it's Marilyn Maya, and today I plan to talk about Middlemarch and how I plan to read it. But first I want to thank everyone for your well wishes and prayers excuse me, for my dog, Princessa Jasmine. I'm crossing my fingers, but she seems to be slowly coming back into herself. So thank you so much for your well wishes. But today's video is about the book Middlemarch. And in the beginning, I opened the book really excited to read it because I planned to read it at the end of October, when all my Victorian reading was ending down. First thing I noticed about it was that in Canada it cost $40 for the Penguin Deluxe Edition, and I know, even in the United States it was $30, and I didn't spend $30. So this is a beautiful, beautiful copy of the book. I'm really excited, but it's intimidating. It's a very intimidating book. It's dense, it's known to be difficult, and I read one George Eliot book before, Silas Marner. I read it in high school, and then I read it recently, last Victober, and I have to say I didn't like it either time. First time I didn't appreciate it or understand it. The second time I wasn't into it. It didn't do anything for me. But Middlemarch is going to be different, and I'm going to give you 5 tips that I'm going to give you that were given to me by another booktuber, YouTuber, podcaster. His name is benjaminmcevoy or McAvoy. I'm sorry that I didn't I tried to look up how to pronounce his name. But when I was looking up on Booktube how to read Middlemarch, I came upon his wonderful channel. He's a big, he's not only a booktuber, I mean, he's a brain, as we used to say in the 50s and 60s. And he gave me a lot of tips on improving my experience with George Eliot in this very beloved book. So my first tip from him, and I'm not going to just, repeat what he said. I'm going to give why I want to do what he said, and there's some things that he said that I don't want to do, but that's my prerogative. So the first thing I plan to do is not do what I did in the introduction, was to go through it fast, because George Eliot, according to McAvoy, I'll say just McAvoy, said that that George Eliot's intention was not to have it read that way. And I want to read it as George Eliot intended it to be read, as an essay, and that's going to come later. So I plan to read it slowly, and Benjamin McAvoy said that this came out in serial form, which I knew already by other booktubers, and he really explains, and I'm going to have the video that he how to read Middlemarch down below in case you want to check it out, and I really suggest you do. And he was talking about how books were read then, and how expensive it was to buy a book. And it came out in serial form, and it came out in winter, one of the coldest and rainiest winters up to that time. And I'm in Hawaii, so we don't really get severe winters. In fact, today we lost our electric, so it was really brutal. In fact, one thing I love about Hawaii is that when it does get so hot, you can just open the windows if you have screens and get the breeze. So in that way it was cooler outside than it was inside. But anyway, I plan to read this in serial fashion. And and I'll get back to that later. Number 2 is that I plan to read the first, I think it's the preface or the prologue, and take notes on it, because he said, Benjamin, that the preface will give you a really good introduction into the reading of the book. And number 3 is I plan to read it and write in the margins. I know, but I always did write it, little words in the margins of the book. And even though this is the deluxe edition, I know it's not going to be the last edition that I read. So he gave a very good reason for this, and I have my own reasons. But when you write something down, especially if it's a difficult or dense book, you really get to understand it. And because writing enforces understanding of what you're reading. And I know that from going to school. Whenever there was something I didn't understand, I would write. So I'm going to write in the margins. How else am I going to read it? I said I was starting in winter. I'm going to, now, George Eliot wrote this book as an essay. And essay comes from the French word to attempt or try. And she was attempting to make you understand the social reformation that came around that time. And though I heard she only agreed with one of the social reformations, I want to read it. She took copious notes when she wrote this book, and it was very important for her to be accurate, and I want to read it in the way that it was intended. So that's another thing. I want to learn more about the social reformation that came about during this time. A lot of things were happening in England, and they were coming out of a very difficult time. They were going into a difficult time where, the Victorian, and, how people were treated, and people were going from an agricultural system to more of a factory industrialized system. So there was a lot of change and turmoil going around. And I think this book, if you read it like one chapter after another or one part after another, you won't see how it changes from year to year. Because this was published, I think, 2 years. First part and second part, I'm not sure exactly, but I want to ask Kim of Middle of the Bookmarch how she read this book. And I know she changed her whole name of her channel to Middle of the Bookmarch, so she knows much more about this than I do. But she was the impetus for me to take up and buy this book. So I really am excited to read it. I'm going to start by the preface, and I'm going to take notes because she took copious notes, like I said. So yeah, so what else am I going to do with this book? I'm going to get a special book, a diary, to write down all the thoughts that I have, or all the questions. I once had a teacher who didn't make us take tests. What he did was tell us to write every chapter 10 questions that we had. And we didn't understand it at that time, but really it's a wonderful way to learn, is to write questions, and that's what I intend to do. So I just wanted to come on here. I was going to do a Victober wrap-up, but it's still Victober, and I'm starting this book in Victober. He says, Benjamin says, to wait 2 months after you finish the first part of this book, because that's when the serial came out of the second book. And this way you get to appreciate what you've read so far. Maybe go back into your notes. I'm saying that part. And let me just see if I said everything that I want to say about it. What I want to say is that I'm excited. And I'll get back to you before the end of the month, hopefully, if I plan to read, finish the preface at least. So, Kim, tell me how you read Middlemarch, or anybody else who's read this beloved book, how you read it. And, you know, I heard that going through it more than once, you get to learn more and more. This is a book to be read and read over again to really get the most out of it. So I hope you enjoyed my video about my tips and about how I'm going to read this book. It's really the way I plan to read it. I'm not giving anyone instructions how they should read it, but please comment below, and if you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. I really appreciate all my friends here, and if you've read Middlemarch, tell me what your experience was. So until we meet again very soon when I do my Victober wrap-up and getting into Nonfiction November, which I'm really excited about, I wish you everything your heart desires, and I wish you joy, happiness, and aloha.